Good morning. I'm just back from a visit to Sinclair Seamen's Presbyterian Church located on Corporation Street down in the Docklands, in the area commonly known as Sailortown. And this church, if you've followed the YouTube video that I made on it a day or two ago, is unique. It is unique on the architecture of the outside of the church, the way the church has been built. And it's also unique because of the artefacts and memorabilia connected to the sea that are displayed all over the inside of the church. It is an amazing church, and not like any other church that I have visited. The pulpit resembles the prow of a ship, and there's modern galleons also even suspended from the rafters, and everything and everywhere that you look around in the inside of the church, it speaks of the sea. And I was wondering, what was the idea and motivation behind, and it was largely down to a past minister, the Rev Cochrane. What was his idea in transforming the inside of the church with all these nautical historical pieces? You may not be aware, but what Rev Cochrane and his supporters were doing ran right against the grain of Protestantism and Presbyterianism at that particular time, because Presbyterianism and Protestantism of that time dictated that the inside of any of their churches would be as austere and plain as possible. And the idea was that this, all eyes and all ears would be focused on the preaching of the gospel, rather than being distracted by what was up on the walls as regards pictures or sculptures or artifacts. They didn't want some child or adult going off into some imagination world by looking at these things and any other sculptures or paintings. The whole idea was to keep their mind completely focused on the preacher and the reading of the Bible. But in thinking about Cochrane, I think that possibly his idea was that it ran contrary to this idea, because I think he wanted people to look at the artifacts and hopefully it would bring the message of the Bible more real to the people. They would make people think about the message of the Bible and how it related to them. In the early church, we know that great store was placed upon presenting the gospel and the Bible in visual form, and you can see that up in many church stained glass windows. And the fact of the matter was, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, many people simply couldn't read. So the stained glass windows of the church were often referred to as the poor man's Bible, because you could look around the stained glass windows and see the stories of the Bible reflected there. And I think this was probably Cochrane's idea, that in looking at some of the artifacts and some of the models and whatever else he had up on the wall, people would actually think about the Bible message. For example, before each Sunday service, the huge brass bell of the HMS Hood. Now, this isn't the Second World War HMS Hood, because there was two before that. But this brass bell that was recovered from Portland harbour is run, and the hood was actually deliberately sunk during the First World War across the mouth of Portland Harbour to protect the harbour from submarine attacks. And in the same way, the church is looked upon, or maybe Cochrane's idea was that the church should be seen as a haven, as a place of protection, offering hope for people and safety for people. The stained glass windows with the First World War officers, there's a seaman, there's an infantryman, and there's an airman. This would warn us of the sacrifice that soldiers and sailors right down through the ages have made on behalf of other people, giving their lives for others. And of course, this reminds us of Christ's sacrifice for sinners along the road of life. The working lighthouses mounted on the wall of the church perhaps stand as a stark warning that we all need God's clear direction and light as we steer our course through the perils and dangers of this life. Folk in the church would say that many of us actually prefer to go our own way and reject the safe harbour of God's love and mercy and care that He extends to each and every one of us. John 3:16 is often quoted in and around Sinclair Seamen's, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only and one and only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish, but have eternal life." John 3:16. And the message from the church and the preachers is that we ignore God's light and God's safety at our peril. Again, John 3:18 says, "Whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of God's one and only Son." So all these artifacts actually are there, or most of them are there, for a purpose. They symbolise something else far deeper. Why don't you take a dander down Wednesday afternoons 2 to 4 when the church will be open, and you can come round and see all these wonderful artifacts and architecture, paintings, sculptures, models, all sorts of things. Come down and see it for yourself. I reckon you won't be disappointed.